You may meet the hunter, who is invoked as Alrebek. He bears the spear of bitter mercy. He comes here from the hunting grounds to hunt the new prey, or he brings prey native to the hunting grounds, like the unicorn, to hunt in the new forests. If he brings not prey, then woe betide you who meet him, for he may dub you the hare. Then you must flee as best you can, though you will not escape. To city folk, you may be hard-pressed to name a Daedric prince less relevant to your life and experiences, for modern mortals prefer cobbled streets, a crackling hearth, full walls and a roof to keep away the elements. With enough human ingenuity, you can create a reality where the elements have no control over you. But should you stray too far from the beaten track? Should you leave your comforts and luxuries to come face to face with nature in all its raw and unforgiving beauty? Well, you're no longer protected by your precious civility and ethical standards. You're in the domain of Kynareth, and here in Kyne's wilderness, a Daedric prince stalks, ever searching for fresh prey. This prince is Hircine, the huntsman. Hey guys, it's Drew the Daedrologist here and welcome back to FudgeMuppet. In this video we're going to scour the woods for the tracks of Tamriel's greatest apex predator. We'll follow his scent until we know all there is to know about this Daedric prince, and we'll unearth the real world folklore that inspires one of my personal favourite Daedric princes. The father of man-beasts, the huntsman, Lord Hircine. Before we tackle the meat and potatoes of this video, which is Hircine's connection to the cultural phenomenon known as the Wild Hunt, let's get to know the Daedric prince. Hircine's sphere is the hunt. It is the sport of the Daedra, the great game and the chase. It is the pursuit of the perfect quarry. He is also known for the creation of the various therianthropic diseases, most notably lycanthropy. Many scholars believe that Hircine, like Malakath, was not one of the original Daedric princes, but rather an offshoot. But the presence of lycanthropes on Tamriel as early as the Merethic era seems to debunk this theory. Perhaps in the spirit of the hunt, Hircine slipped through the cracks of early recorded history. Maybe those who endeavoured to document Hircine's influence on Mundus were brought down by his spear and fed to the hounds. Hircine has 3 known artefacts, however one of these has questionable origins and uncertain ownership. This is the Spear of Bitter Mercy. This spear is almost always present in depictions of the prince, and it plays an important role in the Great Game. One could only wonder how many terrified quarries were brought down by this weapon. The legend of Fane Icehammer tells of a Nord who unknowingly killed several were creatures during a hunt. This ired the mighty Hircine, who retaliated by thrusting his spear into the Icehammer's flank. The tip broke off and remained lodged inside him. It began to corrupt him with bitterness and rage, until he murdered an acolyte of Kyne in cold blood. He was sealed in the Cragwallow burial vault for all time as punishment. Another of Hircine's artifacts is the Saviour's Hide. The commonly held creation story for this artifact tells of the first and only mortal to escape from Hircine's realm of Oblivion, the hunting grounds. Hircine stripped the pelt from his own back, and the victor had it tailored into this magical cuirass. As Daedric artifacts tend to do, the hide is notorious for choosing a new hero to assist, seemingly of its own volition. The third and final artifact associated with Hircine is his ring. The Ring of Hircine is an engraved ring featuring the head of a wolf shaped into the metal. This unique ring can grant the wearer the temporary effects of lycanthropy, or in the hands of a true were creature, it can allow them to control their transformations. Being able to control bloodlust and ignore the cycles of the moons is invaluable to lycanthropes, as it drastically lowers the chances of innocent casualties. It can supposedly also provide the wearer with extended life, as was the case with the Skull leader Fast and Heartfang. Hircine withdrew his ring from Heartfang once, but that did not stop him from getting his hands on the artifact once more. When Hircine's patience was at an end, he made Fasten the subject of his next Blood Moon hunt. But we'll speak of this fascinating prophecy soon. By the 201st year of the 4th era, the ring was in the possession of a werewolf named Sinding, who wished to control his transformations. In order to obtain it, he stole it from the prince, but the plan backfired, as the scorned prince cursed the ring. Rather than controlled transformations, Sinding was gifted with random transformations that would not cease unless someone offered to take the ring from him willingly. This ordeal led to the slaughter of an innocent child. This story of Hircine's is the first of many similarities between the father of man-beasts and the wild hunt of European mythology and folklore. I plan to speak about this extensively, but one quirk of the mysterious spirits making up the wild hunt is that their gifts often come with curses in tow, just like Hircine's ring. In Germanic folktales, if a man helps the hunt, he will be awarded money, gold, or most often the leg of a slain animal or human, which is often cursed in a way that makes it impossible to be rid of it. Sounds familiar? But before we go deeper, let's briefly talk about his realm of Oblivion, and the uncanny chain of events which led to the creation of were-creatures. There is also the Blood Moon Prophecy, which I'll explain briefly, but if you want a detailed account of what this entails, I recommend watching our full story on the Blood Moon Prophecy. You can find it linked below in the description. The Blood Moon Prophecy is a Skull legend, in which the Prince of the Hunt enters Mundus once every era. This makes it an extremely rare occurrence, and Hircine makes the most of it. The commencement of the Great Blood Moon Hunt is heralded by 4 signs. The first is the coming of the hounds, as werewolves appear in abundance on the Isle of Solstheim. The second is called the Fire from the Eye of Glass, and involves a pillar of fire emerging from the centre of the frozen Lake Fjalding. The third sign is the Tide of Woe, when all of the island's hawkers wash up dead on the northern shores. And the final sign, signifying that the time is nigh, is when the moon Secunda turns crimson, stained by the blood of Hircine's prey. The details of the game changes each era, but it always entails a hunt. Whether it be a tribe or a lone man, the prince will not relent until the quarry has been killed. Hircine's Plain of Oblivion is called the Hunting Grounds. It is a realm of endless forests and fields, populated by all manner of predator and prey. It is the marksman's playground, a sensory overload for the tracker, an eternal open season for the hunter. This is where the souls of lycanthropes come after death. Here they may experience the thrill of the chase for all time, satiating their ceaseless bloodlust on prey that cannot go extinct. Were-creatures were not always present in Mundus, but one particular clash, likely sometime in the Malefic era, provoked Hircine to invent them. When I tell the stories of the Daedric lords, there is always one prince who manages to shoehorn himself into the discussion. He's not content to wait his turn like the others. No, his trickery makes him relevant to every story, much to the chagrin of his counterparts. Hircine created lycanthropes in response to a challenge from Sheogorath. Ever proud and boastful, Oblivion's Mad Prince stood one 5th day of a mid-year among the frigid peaks of Skyrim, and beckoned forth Hircine for parley. The huntsman god materialised, for this was his day, and the boldness of Sheogorath intrigued him. Wry without equal, Sheogorath holds in his realm giggling loons, flamboyant auteurs, and craven mutilators. The Mad Prince will ply profitless bargains and promote senseless bloodshed for nothing more than the joy of another's confusion, tragedy, or rage. So it was that Sheogorath had set a stage on which to play himself as rival to Hircine. Without haste, the coy prince proffered his contest. Each prince was to groom a beast to meet at this place again, 3 years to the hour, and do fatal battle. Expressionless behind his fearsome countenance, Hircine agreed, and with naught but a dusting of snow in the drift, the princes were gone to their realms. Hircine was the patron of predators, while Sheogorath held dominion over madmen and jesters. This would surely be a swift victory for the soon-to-be father of man-beasts. Hircine secretly bred an abomination in his realm. An ancient Daedroth he summoned, and imbued it with the foul curse of lycanthropy. Of pitch heart and jagged fang, the unspeakable horror had no peer, even among the great hunters of Hircine's sphere. When the princes reconvened 3 years hence, Sheogorath revealed a tiny colourful bird, which chirped demurely. In a twisted, springing heap, the Daedroth was upon the stone, leaving only rubble where the boulder had been. Thinking itself victorious, the monster's blooded maw curled into a mock grin, when a subdued song drifted in the crisp air. The tiny bird lightly hopped along the snout of the furious Daedroth. Sheogorath looked on, quietly mirthful, as the diminutive creature picked at a bit of detritus caught in scales betwixt the fiery eyes of the larger beast. With howling fury, the were-thing blinded itself, trying to pluck away the nuisance, and so it continued for hours. Hircine looking on in shame while his finest beast gradually destroyed itself in pursuit of the seemingly oblivious bird, all the while chirping a mournful tune to the lonesome range. Livid but beaten, Hircine burned the ragged corpse and withdrew to his realm, swearing in forgotten tongues. His curses still hang in those peaks, and no wayfarer tarries for fear of his wrathful aspect in those obscured heights. Not the most dignifying of origin stories. A snarling behemoth of this magnitude would have been better off dueling a champion of Boethia. At least then the rules would be clear cut, and there would be no chance of deception. Of all the cruel traits Hircine may harbour as a hunter, he is not deceptive. He is entirely predictable, and in that regard he is Sheogorath's opposite. Hircine is the huntsman, and the rules of engagement when it comes to the great game are clear and concise. There is no injustice in the hunt. Sportsmanship is key in any game. If the odds are too heavily stacked against one side, the game cannot go ahead. The prey is the underdog, but it is never impossible for them to overcome the odds and turn the tides of the game, becoming the hunter. Granted, unlike say Boethia, Hircine is not going to pit two worthy competitors against one another in single combat. That's like two predators competing for dominance. Hircine prefers the predator-prey relationship. Hircine's hunt is not simply about the process of spilling blood, it is about the skill it took to spill the blood. A Daedric lord doesn't need to eat, so the method used to catch the hare is more important than the meat on the hare's bones. The journey is more important than the destination, so to speak. A good example of that is the fact that Hircine's hunt can even be attributed in situations where no one is killed. For instance, he is just as interested in the metaphorical hunt that is the sexual pursuit of a mate, for it is a competitive game that only the best will win, and that can be seen through one of his 5 aspects. You may meet the great stag who is invoked as Urakanbeg, and whose hooves drum the blood summons. He comes to mate with the hinds, and may transform a comely woman for that purpose. This is another major characteristic of Hircine's that relates closely to the principles of the wild hunt in European folklore. There is a neat detail in the Germanic variation of the wild hunt that I find particularly intriguing. When the spirits of the wild hunt gallop through the forest and happen upon a mortal, the mortal should not flee. That is the worst thing they could do. The wise course of action would be to stay right in the middle of the road for the duration of the encounter. Doing so will guarantee the mortal's safety. That alludes to the fact that the wild hunt, and by extension Hircine, are only interested in killing mortals if it is in the name of good sport. It must be a feat of tracking or marksmanship, not some butchery in the centre of a wide open path. Where's the glory in that? With that in mind, you could quite easily make the case that Hircine is the Daedric prince least likely to trick you. He absolutely has the power to deceive you, but abusing that power would be antithetical to his sphere. Let's now hone in on this correlation between Hircine of the Elder Scrolls universe and the wild hunt of our own universe. Hircine is heavily inspired by this cultural phenomenon. A wild hunt is a folklore motif, occurring across a vast array of cultures seemingly disconnected from one another. Each interpretation has its own flourishes, but the common theme is that the wild hunt is a ghostly or supernatural group of hunters passing in wild pursuit. The participants are usually elves or fairies or even the dead, and seeing the hunt was usually followed by war, catastrophe, or at the very least the death of the witness. It was often speculated that some of the hunt's victims were kidnapped and transported to the underworld, or the fairy kingdom. Now when I say fairies, I don't mean the twinkly little sprites portrayed in modern media. Fairies were often far more nuanced than that, and oftentimes they were not the kind of spirits you'd want to encounter. The term fairy was used as an umbrella term for all manner of spirits with a connection to the metaphysical and the preternatural. Rather than granting wishes, fairies were often blamed for all manner of illnesses prior to the advent of modern medicine. On almost all accounts of fairies, they had their own other world, a plane of existence where only the fairies dwelled. In that regard, fairies have a lot of similarities to the Daedra, and we know full well that Hircine is no stranger to abducting mortals to let loose in his realm the hunting grounds. Many names have been attributed with the leadership of the wild hunt, and this varies greatly across Europe. Legendary figures including King Arthur and the Norse god Odin are some standouts, but it is in the English folklore that one particular name draws my attention. This name is Herne the Hunter. Conjured up by the imagination of William Shakespeare, likely inspired by local tales, Herne the Hunter is a ghost who resides in Windsor Forest. He is usually depicted atop a horse blowing a horn, accompanied by hounds and most importantly, with a stag's antlers protruding from his head. Bastardized adaptations of Shakespeare's play refer to him as Horn, and claim the ghost was invented to scare children into obedience, much like most folklore mind you, and that mothers tell their children the tale of a ghost who walks the forest in the form of a great stag. What with this description and the references I made earlier, I doubt I need to convince you more about the connection between the Daedric Prince and the phenomenon of the Wild Hunt, but we can learn some valuable information about Hircine's purpose from this parallel. Modern pagans, while that is quite a paradoxical concept, have offered some interesting insights into the value of this folklore. Pagans often consider engaging with the Wild Hunt a rite of passage. It exists as an obstacle to overcome a fear of the wilderness. It is a means of confronting the dark of nature as a process of initiation. Challengers would explore the woodland during the day, and then repeat the process as a timed competition at night to gain mastery over the hunting grounds. This led to gaining the trust of the wood's spirits, and would thus be able to harvest the fruits of the forest in terms of timber and game. An engagement with the hunt is a bid to restore a reciprocity and harmony between humans and nature. It's definitely a lot easier to face the concept of the Wild Hunt when in the real world you know it is little more than a wives' tale used to scare children. For the mortals of Tamriel, where these deities roam the Mundus, it requires a great deal more courage to wander the forests at night. But as we could deduce from the pagan rites associated with the Wild Hunt, this cultural phenomenon of folklore seems to exist like a fable, filled with hidden meanings and morals to the stories. In Scandinavian lore, in which the god Odin led the Wild Hunt, it was safest to lie on the ground, avoiding the reach of his weapon from horseback. The truth in this story relates to real-world wisdom, likely evolving from the popular belief that one is safer from lightning strikes if they are lying at ground level. Lightning and the hunt seem entirely irrelevant, but it seems as though the Scandinavians used the Wild Hunt as a metaphor for proper precautionary measures when venturing out into the wild, away from shelter and safety. Most archaic stories function this way, using analogies and metaphors to instill important values into the commoners. The best way for humans to conquer the wild is for humans to tackle it with the correct amount of reverence and a dash of fear. Underestimating it will get you killed, for nature doesn't care too much about your laws and ethics. If a wolf sees you, it eats you. Simple as that. Even if we would consider that murder, don't underestimate the dangers of what lies outside your home, but similarly, don't be afraid to confront them. That is what Hircine represents beyond all of his games and hunts. When the great horns herald the coming of Hircine's hunt, do not flee. Stand your ground, rise above the threat, and become the hunter. And that is my take on the huntsman Hircine. I hope you enjoyed the video and thanks so much for watching. Once again, my name is Drew and I'll see you later.